Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to another episode of Quran in English. My name is Ahmed and I'm happy to take you through a new chapter. Surah Al Hajj, the chapter of the pilgrimage. The pilgrimage, aka the big pilgrimage that Muslims are instructed to do at least once in their life. But before we get into the verses, I must always explain what we're doing here. This channel is an educational channel. In fact, I am sharing my education journey with the Quran with you. For a lot of the Quran, I'm reading it for the very first time, and I'm sharing my understanding of what I'm reading with you before I get into um, other explanations or other perspectives. I'm starting with what do I understand first, and then I move from there. But I may not completely understand things or I may misunderstand things. So if you have a different perspective, feel free to drop a comment and I would love to learn from you as much as I hope that you learn from me. One last thing I wanted to say before we get started is today I found myself saying the words, the Quran is cool, which is it's like, it's cool for me because it's interesting and unique. It has so much information that you can't find anywhere else and it's jam packed and there's like so much. It's so interesting to study, and I'm very happy that I'm studying it at this point in my life. At this point in my life, I have a base general knowledge of a bunch of different topics, and the Quran is kind of just showing me the light within the realm of thought because you can think about things a million different ways, and I'm just very excited to learn about life through the lens of the Quran because I do believe it to be the word of God as relayed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Yeah, that's the disclaimer. That's the intro. 2 minutes as usual. And yeah, before we read Quran, we must always say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, and off we go.
يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم إن زلزلة الساعة شيء عظيم.
What was that sound? Yeah, it says, "O ye people, O ye humans, O ye people, O humanity, fear your Lord, fear your God. Not fear. Be mindful. Keep God in your mind. Fear is a different word. Khafu is fear. Ittaqu means like, yeah, kind of like keep in mind, keep thinking of. It can be close to fear in the sense that you can, for instance, you can tattaqi nar, which means you can be mindful of fire. It's not like you're afraid the fire is going to burn you, but just watch out that you don't put your hand on the fire so that it doesn't burn you. So, like, watch out is more accurate than be afraid, right? And we see this word quite often in the Quran. Where it says, be mindful of God. Why? Because indeed, the convulsion, the quake, the earthquake, the convulsion of the hour is something that is great. Which, what is this talking about? This is talking about Judgment Day. This is talking about Resurrection Day. And there is a chapter of the Quran called Al-Zalzala, I think. So I'm a bit hazy on the names of the chapters, but I know the verses of it. إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها. If the earth quakes, it's quake. And it generally talks about the end of times because in that chapter it says once the earth shakes, those that do an atom of a good deed will feel it and will see, and those that do an atom of a bad deed will see. So it indicates Judgment Day. And here it's asking us to be mindful of God because the quake of the final hour is terrifying. And it made me think about like this. The Quran was, inspired, revealed to the Prophet Muhammad 1,450 plus years ago, and I guess people have been kind of like worried about it. And I thought about, okay, all those people that have died since then, do they just not see the earthquake and they only get resurrected after the earthquake? Which I think that's the case. I think the earthquake comes first, then the judgment, or the earthquake comes first, then the resurrection. It's very interesting, very unique. But anyway, it's saying be mindful because when the earth quakes, it's a mighty thing, a terrible thing, a dreadful thing. It's a great thing. Mighty is like, Azim is grand, big. Dreadful is not the right word. It's a grand thing. It's a huge thing. It is the thing. It's like when the final buzzer blows at the end of a match. That's it. Game over. Nothing to be done. Whoever's won. Whoever lost. You know.
يوم ترونها تذهل كل مرضعة عما أرضعت وتضع كل ذات حمل حملها وترى الناس سكارى وما هم بسكارى ولكن عذاب الله شديد.
On that day, that is the day that you will see it, where every nursing mother will forget what she was nursing. And then it says, and will deliver وَتَضَعُ, or will place every pregnant woman what she's carrying. Which here is saying will deliver her burden prematurely. That's kind of the understanding, but the exact wording was وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا. And it will place every pregnant woman what she is pregnant with. She will place it. What does that mean exactly? Will she deliver it? Will she no longer be carrying it? Does everybody have to die before they're resurrected, or the people that are alive, do they get to go straight to resurrection? Either way, it paints a very powerful and terrifying image. And I never thought about pregnant women during Judgment Day. I never thought about what would happen to them. And I also didn't think about whether people die first, or some people that are alive would just go straight to Judgment Day, the Judgment Hour. But anyway, it's a great day. Nursing mothers will forget who they nursed, essentially saying that everybody will kind of lose all sense of what was important to them. And it says, and you will see people drunk, intoxicated, while they are not drunk. They will look like they're drunk, but they're not drunk, which means kind of like it gives you an image of someone not focused, not knowing what's happening, kind of barely functioning, barely walking, barely able to succeed. Like, it's just such overwhelming pressure that they will behave as if they're intoxicated. But the punishment of God is severe. I wonder why it says, and you'll see the people drunk, even though they're not drunk, but the torment of God is severe. I'm trying to think of what the connection between the two is. What does being drunk and seeing the torment of God being severe? وترى الناس سكارى وما هم بسكارى ولكن عذاب الله شديد. I don't know. Something about drunk people, something about torment. We know that God's torment is severe. And we understand from this verse that the people will seem drunk, but they're not drunk. Intoxicated is probably the right word. But how do you connect the two? I don't quite know. Because it says but. Technically it says and but. وَلَكِنْ وَلَكِنْ عَذَابٌ. You'll see them drunk, but they're not drunk. But God's punishment, God's torment is severe. I don't quite follow the chain of logic. But either way, terrible, terrible day. Terrible in its magnanimity and strength. And it's just, it's the game over. That's when the clock is up.
ومن الناس من يجادل في الله بغير علم ويتبع كل شيطان مريد.
And of humans, of mankind, is those who argue concerning God. They argue about God. They argue what they think God is, what the God isn't, but they don't have any knowledge, and they follow every devil that is rebellious. And I know very specific people come to mind who are like, oh, God's this, God's that, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's difference between those that say that I don't know, and then those that say, oh, I know God is this, or God is that, or God is terrible, or evil, or mean, or the demiurge, or there's 6,000 different variations of probably more than 6,000 of what God is. And all of them are just following the devils that are rebellious. And again, devil is not a creature, but a descriptor of creatures. So you can have human devils, you can have jinn devils, you can shaitan just means the characteristics that belong to. But here, when they're following the devil that is rebellious, it could be human, could be jinn. Because following, you could follow a human, you could follow a jinn, could be something that you worship or a human that you follow.
كتب عليه أنه من تولاه فأنه يضله ويهديه إلى عذاب السعير.
It was written upon him, the one who follows every devil that's rebellious. It was written upon him that whoever befriends him, they're saying it's written for every devil. No. I think it's talking about the person who is following them. Someone who dispute about God without knowledge, following the rebellious devil, following every rebellious devil. And it has been decreed for these that dispute about God. It's written for him that whoever befriends him, that indeed he will misguide them, and he will be guided towards a punishment that is fire. وَيَهْدِيهِ إِلَى عَذَابِ السَّعِيرِ. Yeah. فإنه يضله ويهديه. كتب عليه أنه من تولاه فإنه يضله ويهديه إلى عذاب السعير. So for me, I said whoever befriends him is going to misguide him and guide him towards a punishment that is blazing. That's how I understood. The person who disputes about God without knowledge, following every rebellious devil, whoever befriends him is going to cause him to be more confused and going straight to the fire. If you thought those verses were interesting and confusing, there's this verse. I have a different perspective of how it was explained to me versus how I know, but it's a long verse, so let's get into it.
يا أيها الناس إن كنتم في ريب من البعث فإنا خلقناكم من تراب ثم من نطفة ثم من علقة ثم من مضغة مخلقة وغير مخلقة لنبين لكم ونقر في الأرحام ما نشاء إلى أجل مسمى ثم نخرجكم طفلا ثم لتبلغوا أشدكم ومنكم من يتوفى ومنكم من يرد إلى أرذل العمر لكي لا يعلم من بعد علم شيئا وترى الأرض هامدة فإذا أنزلنا عليها الماء اهتزت وربت من كل زوج بهيج.
If you've been following this channel for some time, you understand that when they repeat in the middle of a verse, it challenges me, let's just say. And he repeated multiple times throughout this verse. It's a long verse, don't get me wrong. I understand that you need to break it up. But for me, take a pause and then continue. Like, there's no need to repeat. But anyway, it's a long verse, and a lot is being said. So let's take a look at what is being said. First, it says, O ye of mankind, if you are in doubt about the resurrection, Then know that indeed we have created you from dust. So this is Adam, and that's what footnote number 1 says. This was your father Adam. From dust, then from a semen drop, and here they go. A nutfa is the union of male and female gametes, which results in the zygote after fertilization. So it's kind of talking about creation, dust, then nutfa, zygote. ثم من علقة, from a clinging substance, clinging clot. And if you turn to number 3, alaqa means the embryo resembling a leech. ثم من مضغة مخلقة وغير مخلقة, which means then developing you into a lump of flesh. First, it's a lump of flesh, مضغة meaning a resembled or chewed morsel, and it comes in 2 forms: مضغة وغير مضغة, fully formed and unformed, fully formed or defected, evolving into a healthy embryo or undergoing a miscarriage. And these are a lot of things that, again, this is 1,450 plus years ago. We didn't have access to a microscope. We could not see any of these things. So the fact that the Quran is talking about the stages of human creation at this stage, is absolutely miraculous and kind of amazing for its time. مخلقة, formed, وغير مخلقة, لنبين لكم, so we can make it clear to you. And it's kind of interesting that it's saying, so we can make it clear to you. I don't think it was clear to them 1,450 years ago, but it's clear to us now, looking back, that no human could have known the formation of how things were done. Because as far as they saw, a male and a female would have sex, and then they would just, the belly would grow and the baby would grow, but they don't know the stages. They don't know how to call them different things. They didn't understand. It's just, yeah. In order to think about this, is kind of amazing from 1,450 plus years ago. And we cause to remain in the wombs what we will until a term that is appointed, and then we bring you out as a child, and then you may reach your maturity. So it says several things here. It says we will in the womb for an appointed term. Then we settle whatever we will in the womb for an appointed term. You'll stay in the womb for as long as you need to, and then bring you forth as infants so that you may reach your prime. It's just talking about life and how you're created. You're created as children, so then you can become mature. And then once you become mature, it's kind of established that you are that kind of person. And then it says something that I find very interesting and very exciting and very cool. But I have heard it explained to me in a different way. And I will tell you what the general way that it has been explained to me and the general understanding of this verse first. And then I'll tell you what I see and what I believe second. And among you who dies, and among you who is returned to the most abject, the smallest, the kleinest, the weakest of age, so that they do not know after that knowing anything, so that they don't know anything after that. Now, the general understanding of philosophy, as it was taught to me, as I learned it, was that, you grow up and some of you die at a young age, but some of you live long enough to get to old age where you get like frail and tiny and you forget things. That is not what I understand. Primarily because it said you returned to the most abject of age. Returned in age, not returned in size. Not like you grow big and then you become frail. I understand what they're trying to say. They're trying to say you hit maturity, and those who die, and then those who don't die become weak in age. But then they're thinking it's weak in size. But it says يُرَدُّ إِلَى أَرْذَلِ الْعُمْرِ, returned to the most abject age. Let's let's put this into our wonderful translate and see what it says. Return to the worst part of life. So here's the translation that they're saying it's here, which let's speak about my own ignorance. It's very much could be returned to an age that is, and this is an expression of talking about coming to an age where you're frail and weak, and you didn't die and you become frail and weak. I accept that this can make sense, but the other option is that the way that I thought about it is being returned to an age so that you do not know from after that anything. So that you don't know anything, for me, returned in age, so you don't know anything, translated, I know, I'm very different, but translated into reincarnation. Those that die having fulfilled their destiny, and those who will be returned as a baby and reset to an age where they don't know anything. Specifically when they don't know anything. Yes, you start losing some information as you get older, but never to the point of not knowing anything unless you have a degenerative disease, unless your brain is under a specific condition. But then that's not true for everybody. Not everybody's grandparents die knowing nothing, right? The fact that it says that knows from after that in knowledge not a thing, so that they do not know from after that any knowledge, like that's got to be a return to an age where you don't know anything. I mean, it sounds like reincarnation. It sounds like, okay, you die and you're going to the end, you get reincarnated. Now, whether or not that makes sense, whether or not that is true, that is to be seen, but this is just a theory. This is just what I'm understanding. And I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me. Won't be the very first time. But maybe there is some sort of concept of like hierarchy and repetition and souls that kind of have to go through multiple iterations of life. I don't know. I don't understand. There isn't enough evidence to suggest that reincarnation is the way to go, but that's just what I see when I read this. And I don't see when you get into old age so that you do not know from after any knowledge anything. Like I don't see that happening at old age. I don't see at old age that you forget everything. And I'm sure many of us have grandparents that have had that, some maybe on the last moments of death you kind of disconnect and you kind of lose, but everyone kind of disconnects and loses. But that's not about age, right? That's about death. So I don't know. I don't see it as being old age, but I can understand it as a theory. And you will see the earth barren, but then if we send down upon it water, it gets stirred and it swells and it grows from every kind, every pair. Zawjin bahij, yeah, every pair, right? Producing every type of pleasant plant. Either way, a lifeless earth can bring forth life. Yeah, so here they've translated to while some of you may die young. Again, it doesn't say may die young. It says some of you die. Others are left to reach the most feeble stage of life so that they may know nothing after having known much. That's the kind of the general understanding is that they'll reach the most feeble stage, but it's not reach, it's return. Yarud. That was kind of the word. Yuraddu is returned to the most abject age, which is like if you're returning, you're not going forward. And if you're returning to your abject size, you're returning to an abject age. So I struggle to accept the popular opinion on this topic. Not to say that reincarnation is the correct way, but it feels a bit more accurate than not. Interesting.
ذلك بأن الله هو الحق وأنه يحيي الموتى وأنه على كل شيء قدير.
Here's a good point. That is because God is the truth, and we've seen this word time and time again with me and Safa. The world is created in truth. God is the truth. And so, we see this time and time again. Here we see it as saying that God is the truth instead of the world is created in truth. I think for me, it's all the above, right? It's a combination of the world being in truth, but also talking about God. God is the truth. And the way that it says it further is that He is the one that gives life to the dead, and indeed He is over everything. All capable, all powerful, He can do everything. Which again, reincarnation is not outside of God's hands. That doesn't make it true, but that's kind of that God can do anything. And the whole purpose of these verses that we've been reading is from death comes life, from life comes death. There seems to be a cyclical nature, and we've seen this example time and time again. So why not have this moment of like you either live your life and you die because you have reached the final age, or you have a kind of reiteration. It's possible. I don't know enough to give you the answer of what it is. I'm just telling you what the Quran says and why I think the way that I do based off of what it says.
وأن الساعة آتية لا ريب فيها وأن الله يبعث من في القبور.
And indeed, the hour is coming. There is no doubt about it. And indeed, God will resurrect whoever is in the graves. Again, all of those will be resurrected. All of those will be brought back, which we know. Which it could be as simple as this is what God is saying, that everything will be resurrected and that God is capable of everything. Yeah, it could be Occam's razor. The most simple explanation is the best.
ومن الناس من يجادل في الله بغير علم ولا هدى ولا كتاب منير.
And from the humans, from mankind, is those who dispute concerning God without knowledge and without guidance and without a book that is enlightening. We talked about them a little bit earlier in the chapter. That there are people that argue about God and while they're following devils. And here they also kind of say without knowledge, without guidance, and without a book that is enlightening. Which again, that word book is a key word. In the Quran mentioned multiple times. It does mean the Quran. The Quran is an enlightening book, but we have seen examples of the Torah being an enlightening book, one that gives light and gives guidance. We have seen the Injil, we have seen the Zabur. The Injil is not exactly the Bible, but what was given to Jesus, which some loosely translate to the Gospels, but it's not the accurate word for it. Anyway. Yeah, anyone who's not following a book or guidance or knowledge, but they're still arguing about God, which is wonderful.
ثاني عطفه ليضل عن سبيل الله له في الدنيا خزي ونذيقه يوم القيامة عذاب الحريق.
Twisting his neck so that to mislead from the way of God. This is the person who's, talking about God without guidance, knowledge, or a book. And they'll twist their necks to talk about God. They'll say a bunch of different things. They'll confuse everyone. And he has for him in this world a disgrace. They will suffer disgrace in this world. And they'll make him taste on the day of judgment, of resurrection, a punishment that is burning. It's interesting that it says that in this world he'll be disgraced, because for instance I can name you a bunch of staunch atheists that say God is evil or God is terrible or not good, and I don't know if they're exactly disgraced. I think they do kind of feel celebrated. So I don't know what this means, that they will suffer disgrace in this world, because I don't necessarily see it, but maybe I don't see it in the way that it is. Maybe lahu fi dunya khizi. Maybe there's a different way of seeing it instead of popular opinion. Maybe it's not talking about popular opinion. Maybe it's talking about a different form of disgrace, and we're just misunderstanding what the verse is saying. But we do know on Judgment Day he will taste the torment that is of burning fire.
ذلك بما قدمت يداك وأن الله ليس بظلام للعبيد.
That is for what he has sent forth his hands, and indeed God, that's because essentially what he will get as a result of his own doing is what it's saying. And indeed God is not unjust to his creation. The word is slaves, but sometimes we use the word servants.
ومن الناس من يعبد الله على حرف فإن أصابه خير اطمأن به وإن أصابته فتنة انقلب على وجهه خسر الدنيا والآخرة ذلك هو الخسران المبين.
And those among them, among the humans, are those who worship God, but on an edge. They're like barely worshiping God. So if it befalls him something good, then he's content with God. He's like, you know what, God's good, God's great. I like God. God likes me. But if he befalls him a trial, a test, something difficult, then he turns upon his face, aka he changes his mind, and he's lost the خسر الدنيا والآخرة, and he's lost the worldly life in the hereafter. Essentially, when something bad happens to him, he goes, "What? God is mean. God is not good. God is terrible," and he loses the worldly life and the hereafter, and in that is the loss that is clear. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My brother in Islam. Ahlan Mohab, nice to see you. Welcome to the channel. So here it's talking about those who kind of worship God barely, and if things are going good, then they're worshiping God, but things go bad, they go, no, God dang, and then they lose everything, and that is probably lost. They tumble on their faces. انقلب على وجهه. I just imagine like a gymnastics tumble. I don't know. انقلب على وجهه, turns upon his face. It's kind of like changes the direction of your belief, let's just say.
يدعو من دون الله ما لا يضره وما لا ينفعه ذلك هو الضلال البعيد.
He calls from besides God what does not harm him and what does not benefit him, and we talked about this in Surah Ibrahim. How? Oh no, it was 14. So there must have been in Al-Anbiya. There we talked about Abraham's story in Al-Anbiya, talking about the statues which could not help the people that they were praying to, could not even help themselves. Like, I mean, if you can easily get destroyed by a boy, why are we worshiping you? And I feel like this is a continuation of those that worship God on a verge, but it could be something different. Anyway, those that they pray to cannot help them or harm them, and those who are ذلك هو الضلال البعيد, and that is the furthest one can stray. If you're asking somebody for help that can't help you, it's like asking a wall, hey, can you give me some money? And you're like, why are you asking the wall for money? It's literally doing nothing for you. Again, the argument that a lot of non-believers make about God is the same kind of argument, that no matter what you pray to God, you won't feel a difference. You won't get a difference. So it's hard to kind of have this argument, so to speak. But at least our claim is that God created everything, and that exists outside of our agreement. Whereas the gods that they worship, they don't harm, they don't do it, they've never created anything, they don't harm anything, they don't do anything, Whereas but it's also kind of like the other thing that God does is deliver divine judgment, and we haven't seen divine judgment for 1,450 years, let's just say. So it's hard to visualize God's judgment, as being a real thing on this earth and on this planet.
يدعو لمن ضره أقرب من نفعه لبئس المولى ولبئس العشير.
They pray to whatever they call to the one who harms him closer than he benefits him. invoke those whose worship leads to harm, more towards harm than it does to benefit. Liman, towards harm closer than towards benefit, is essentially how that's to be understood. And what an evil protector, and what an evil friend, what an evil associate. You're praying to that which causes you to more harm than more good. It's a pretty bad thing.
إن الله يدخل الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار إن الله يفعل ما يريد.
And on the opposite hand, you have those who are misguided and go into hell. Indeed, God will admit those who believe and do good deeds, righteous deeds, towards the gardens that flow from underneath it. Water, paradise, gardens of Eden. Water is a sign of life. They flow from underneath them. Water, aka they always have an unlimited source of life. And indeed, God does what He wills.
من كان يظن أن لن ينصره الله في الدنيا والآخرة فليمدد بسبب إلى السماء ثم ليقطع فلينظر هل يذهبن كيده ما يغيظ.
Now this verse, reading it, I did not understand it. I had to look into the tafsir, and it was like, here they added the word prophet, and all the tafsir talking about the Prophet Muhammad, which I'm like, how do you get, Let's read it word for word and see what it says. Whoever thinks that God will not help him in the world and the hereafter, let him extend a rope to the sky, the heavens, and then let him cut off. So let him see whether his plot will remove what enrages him. Which I was like, what? And then here they've added, whoever thinks that Allah will not help his prophet, which it does not mention his prophet, it does not mention his messenger, it does not mention Muhammad, but all the tafsir, all the general understanding, add the word prophet and messenger and Muhammad. And then the way that they translate, so let him extend a rope into the heavens and then cut it off, most of them translated, let him hang a rope from his house and hang himself and then cut it off, and to see if his plot reduces his anger or removes his anger, which makes zero sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me that we're talking about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. There's no mention of the Prophet. If anything, the phrase actually is talking about what I was struggling with before, is how do you know if God's going to help you or not going to help you? Whoever thinks that God will not help him, that's the person that's the he in this sentence. Whoever thinks that God will not help him, not whoever thinks that God will not help a person that doesn't. So I'm you know what, I'm not gonna ignore your comment, Mohab. I'm gonna address it. Is this the only thing in the book that doesn't make sense? There's a lot of things that we don't understand about the Quran that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't make sense. Ignorance is not a critique of the intelligent. If you're not able to understand it, doesn't mean that what is being said doesn't necessarily make sense. But let's go upon what I was saying to continue. It doesn't make sense that men kana, whoever is, that is the he in the sentence. All of a sudden we're taking len yasuruhu is now talking about somebody else, just using the word him. Because God does mention the Prophet Muhammad, does mention Rasul, does mention the Rasul many times, and the God is very clear. He would not just say he randomly to refer to him. I don't understand this as an understanding. But what I was saying before is that we were making the argument that those who pray to the false gods, they don't benefit them or they don't hurt them. And the critique of a lot of atheists against the Muslims is that God does not help them or hurt them. And I think this verse is talking about that. Whoever thought that God does not help him in the worldly life or the hereafter, but then I don't quite understand. Let him extend a rope into the heavens and then let him cut off. Yeah, here they said let them stretch a rope out to the ceiling and strangle themselves. That's not what's being written. Then let them see if their plan will do away with their cause of rage. Again, those things don't. How would hanging yourself and then cutting it do away with your rage? No. The closest thing that I can think of is talking about suicide, maybe. But what is extend a rope into the heavens and then cut it off? I do not know. I'm not going to claim to understand this verse. Meaning no matter what deniers will do, Allah will never stop supporting his prophet. I do not accept the explanation that we're talking about the prophet. It doesn't make any sense. The Quran talks about Rasul and what God does to protect the Rasul and God does to support him. He mentions it explicitly. I don't think this is what the majority of people think of. I do think this is tied to whether or not God can help us. But فَلْيَمْدُدْ بِسَبَبٍ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ ثُمَّ لِيَقْطَعْ. Let him extend a rope to the heavens and then cut. I don't know what that means. But I'm very interested to find out. Okay.
وكذلك أنزلناه آيات بينات وأن الله يهدي من يريد.
And thus we have sent it down in clear verses, and indeed God guides whom he wills. And actually, I recorded this in a video yesterday, but we've not released the video because we want to finish recording the full chapter first. The video is a chapter of me and Safa recording Surah Al-Nahl, which is chapter 16. We started it together, but we didn't finish recording it. If you want us to release the episode with Safa, just post in the comments of this YouTube video. Let me show her so I can get her excited, so we can get it done. But essentially, the thing that we said was that from the realization that I've come to is that there is so much noise about so many things and so many different perspectives that it's so hard for faith to continue existing. It's so easy for confusion and hatred and anger and jealousy and frustration to overcome faith. And if we didn't have the Quran, I cannot imagine how faith would have survived. It's not only that the Quran is good, it is necessary for us to have guidance. We may not understand it completely. We may not be able to appreciate it completely. And it may take time, but it's also because it's a document for all of time. And at any point claiming that you have completely understood the Quran is at any point you are lying. If you have a real question, Mohab, feel free to drop it. I'm very happy to hear them. But the point I was making is the Quran is such a powerful tool. And it being fixed is so important that it does not change. And obviously we've talked about some of the miracles about the creation of humans from way back when, things that humans couldn't have known. The evidence is in front of us in its perfect grammar form, in its containing of things that we can never think of and never hear, and the fact that it exists for all of time. We really needed the Quran in order to have Islam to succeed, for example, the way that it has. And I can't imagine that it could have gone any other way. So the book has been preserved by God in Arabic. How many languages have it been translated to, and how many translation errors and human interpretations have been made in these translations? So that's a very good question, and this is why I love the Quran versus the Bible or the Hebrew Bible, for example, the Old Testament or the New Testament, because the Old Testament and the New Testament were written originally in languages that were not. I think they were written in Aramaic, and then they were translated into Greek, and then from Greek they were translated into English. And the reason why I love the Quran is that we have it in its original language. Even like the Old Testament, it's written in a Hebrew that's not the Hebrew of today. It's written in Old Hebrew, an ancient Hebrew. I don't know what the exact specific term is. So the issue that you're kind of bringing up as a critique is very fair in the sense that translations of translations of translations, you can lose a lot of meaning. Whereas the beauty of the Quran is that we have the language that it is released in, and that is why I'm doing this channel the way that I'm doing it, because I get to look at the exact words. I don't always agree with the translations, and a lot of people will not agree with my translation or interpretation. There are going to be differences in understanding. There are going to be differences in perspective. And the Quran is not a document that can be understood by one person or by one entity in a specific point in time, because it exists for all of time. So some things will apply and some things are not for our time. Some things are for before our time. Some things are for ahead of our time. So nobody will have a complete understanding of it. It becomes a living document, and that's why we constantly refer to it and constantly read it and constantly try to understand it and constantly discuss it and constantly look at it, because it continues to be a source of inspiration and guidance and light. And the more that you dissect it, the more that you find content that you were there. You didn't also, you joined a bit later in today's session. You missed a verse, for instance, that I said that might be indicating of reincarnation, for example. But that the popular Muslim belief is that it's not about reincarnation. The popular Muslim belief is that it's just about reaching old age. I understand, but if I'm reading Italian, if I was Italian reading it in Italian, then I'm getting the perspective of a person who translated it, unless I became a scholar in Arabic to get the original. Correct. Everyone that is a non-Arabic speaker, you were streaming. Everybody that's a non-Arabic speaker is going to have to rely on people with Arabic language skills. And even if you have Arabic language skills, different people have different interpretations. Does that mean one person is right, one person is wrong? Usually, yes. Can there be more than one meaning of the verses? Yes. Just because you can speak the language doesn't mean that you understand it. But the fact that we can speak it and the fact that we have it in its original, unchanged form, I think is very, very important in order for us to be able to appreciate it. Because then you get to see its glory and its relevance, and the fact that it held for 1,465 years. The document's amazing. And unlike the Old Testament and the New Testament, it is one form, one author, the author being God. But some people will say Muhammad wrote this as if any human could have written one document of this level of perfection, so to speak. But yes. Straight a bit from the Quran, but very good questions. Thank you for sharing them, Mahab. I think it's very important to talk about. And thus we have sent it down with clear verses. Yeah, and you also kind of brought up a point that I kind of brushed off. Clear verses. Some verses of the Quran are not clear. This is not saying that all verses are clear, but all verses are clearly a part of this whole construction. And all verses are in the same form, in the same perfection, in the same style. Like you know a Quranic verse, and the Quranic challenge is always to anyone. And this challenge has been for 1,465 years. I don't know what year we are, Hijri, by the way, 1,450 plus. The challenge has always been, if you can produce a verse of the Quran, produce 10 verses, produce one verse, like. The verses themselves are written in a way that is undeniably miraculous, and that's what makes them clear. That doesn't necessarily mean that their meaning is clear. Ayatim bayinat means they're clear verses. They're clearly a part of something that is magnanimous, and God guides whom He intends. And then we get into another interesting. This is where I thought the Quran was so cool, because I'm learning about so many things that I hadn't thought about before, primarily the Magi. But let's see what it says.
إن الذين آمنوا والذين هادوا والصابئين والنصارى والمجوس والذين أشركوا إن الله يفصل بينهم يوم القيامة إن الله على كل شيء شهيد.
When I first started reading this, I'm like, oh, all these are going to heaven, but I had to wait till the rest of the conversation says. Indeed, those who believed, and those who were Jews, and the Sabians, and the Christians, and the Magians, or the Magi, and those that are polytheists, indeed, God will judge between them on the day of resurrection. And indeed, God is over everything a witness. Who were the Sabians? It refers us back to 262. I've seen a YouTube video. Who were the Sabians? There's a lot of, we have the question here. Who were the Sabians? Some people were thinking that they were from the Sabians of Haran. They're centered on star worship and astrology. Some of them call them as the Mandians. Some people say that the Magians are the Mandians. The people of Median and Persian region, the Zoroastrians. But the Sabians are known to possibly be the home of John the Baptist, primarily associated with John the Baptist, which we talked about, Yahya. Or the word Sabian means to leave one religion for another, leading some to refer to apostates from Islam or people who change their religion. I don't think so. I think it's talking about a specific people. Monotheistic believers in Arabia who followed Abraham that were neither Jewish nor Christians. Sabians of Sheba. So there's quite question marks. We don't quite know who the Sabians are. And then it also mentions wal Majus. Wal Nasara, the Christians, we know. Wal Majus, the Magians. Now the Magians, kind of, the most common word is Zoroastrianism. The Zoroastrianism, I don't exactly know the Zoroastrian religion. Some say that it's like a unity between the three, Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Some people say it's the wise men from the east who visited newborn baby Jesus, describing the Gospel of Matthew, the biblical Magi. Again, they talk about astrology, astronomy, interpreting opens of dreams. They had a monotheistic creator God, but they call them Ahura Mazda. But a dualistic worldview of good and evil. So it's very cool that the Quran talks about these things, and I go like, ooh, the Magi came from this concept. We have the Arabic name for Magi, Majus. It's very cool. But this verse says what? That God will judge between them all on Judgment Day. It's not saying that God is saying, these are the good, these are the bad. God is saying, amongst all these groups, all these people who are essentially trying to seek God and understand God, God will judge between them. God will say who's right, who's wrong. And it doesn't feel like one group will be right or one group will be wrong. I feel like it's individuals. But anyway, God will be a witness upon everything. And the last verse for today.
ألم تر أن الله يسجد له من في السماوات ومن في الأرض والشمس والقمر والنجوم والجبال والشجر والدواب وكثير حق عليه العذاب ومن يهن الله فما له من مكرم إن الله يفعل ما يشاء.
Did you not see that to God prostrates or bows down whoever is in the heavens and whoever is in the earth, and the sun and the moon and the stars and the mountains and trees and the moving creatures and many of the people? It's interesting. It talks about like celestial bodies, heaven and earth, moon, sun, stars, trees, mountains, creatures, and then many people, because many people do not as well. But many and many have earned the punishment, earned upon themselves punishment. So either you worship God or you get punished. That's the dealio. And whoever God humiliates, then he does not have any bestower of honor, any protector. No one can honor him. And indeed, God does whom he wills. Which brings me back to a topic that was raised in the video that Safa and I did, but we have not released the rest of it. We just done the first section. So pop off in the comments if you want to see Safa again and say, this is the content that we're here for. You and Safa, can you please make it happen? And then we will hopefully get through it. It's just fall has arrived in the Netherlands and people's energies are a bit lower without the sun. But yeah, that's the end of today's episode. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. As usual, we always end with Sadaqallah al-Ali al-Azim. And I will catch you guys tomorrow. Guys, girls, everyone that watches this channel. Ma salam. I appreciate you. Goodbye. Bye. Goodbye, part 2.